Hi, BookTube. Today is the first time, well, it wasn't today, but this is the first time in a year and a half that I've been double tagged for a original tag that was the Picture This tag, Picture This book tag, and it was created by Shelly Swearingen and Jack from Spread Book Joy. And I didn't think that I would enjoy this tag as much as I have, but I have. So by the time you watch this, I'll probably be on my trip already. So I'm going to go through these pretty fast. So I'm going to have their information and the prompts in the description box. So let's get at it. Number 1, Love You Forever, written by Robert Munsch and illustrated by Shelia McGraw. Name a book you'll imagine you'll love forever. And I just talked about this book in my last video, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. And one of my commenters said that they had this book since they were a child, and it was all tied up with string or with rubber bands. And if I hadn't moved to Hawaii 40 years ago and had to let go of many of my books, this book would be the same, but I bought another copy. And this was the 75th anniversary copy. And the foreword was by Anna Quinlan, who, by the way, I'm reading a book by her that I'm going to talk about in another video. It's starting with breadcrumbs, but I'll have that in the description below anyway. But I'll read this. I'll love this forever because it has hope in it. Hope and joy and, getting out of adversity with what they used to call pluck. And I love Francie, and I'll always love her. And this also takes place in my hometown, in my exact streets that she mentioned, which was very, very exciting to me. Okay, so number 2. Alexandra, the Terrible, Horrible, Very Bad Day, written by Judith Viorst and illustrated by Ray Cruz. Which books or comforting things do you turn to when you're having a bad day? First of all, I wanted to say that a lot of people who did the tag, I don't think mentioned how famous Judith Viorst was, but she used to have a column in, I think it was Cosmopolitan magazine, when it was really more of an interesting magazine than it looks like it is now. But she was a columnist and an author, and she wrote a variety of books, as well as she was a very important figure in the 60s. Anyway, so what do? And I read Alexandra and the Terrible, Horrible, Bad Day, by the way. So, and I really enjoyed it. So what books or comforting things do you turn to when you're having a bad day? And I think I talked about a lot of these before. Books, I usually turn to mysteries. Maybe a lighter mystery, not a cozy. It has to be something with a little bite to it, but maybe an Agatha Christie or a Jane Austen. Jane Austen comforted me a lot during my 30s. And a lot of nonfiction, like, for example, the Comfort Book by Matt Haig, and books like that I turn to. That book was recently published. And they have a new book, the Hygge book. I haven't read it. I saw a so-so review on it on BookTube. But books like that, I was very much into self-help kind of books, but with a comforting feel. Like I'm thinking of the Comfort Queen, Jennifer Loudon. She had a comforted book that really helped me a lot. In fact, I just bought a couple more of Jennifer Loudon's books that I think I hauled on BookTube. What else do I like? A massage. I used to write poetry when I was in a bad mood or depressed. I don't do that anymore, but writing poetry always helped me. Always having a little notebook and a pen and writing down things that made me feel happy. I love tea. Yeah, those are the things that I do when I'm having a bad day. Number 3, The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle, which I've never heard of, by the way. Which book series character sparked your hunger for reading? Well, my mother bought me little golden books, and they usually were fairy tales, but not always. But what I mentioned in my last video, and I'm going to mention again because it was so important to my becoming a book lover, was, and it'll be here, the Classic Illustrated Junior Comic Books. And that was a series of 27 fairy and folk tales, myth and legend, comic book adaptations created by Albert Lewis Cantor as a spin-off of his flagship comic book, Classics Illustrated. And I was too young for Classics Illustrated, or I wasn't interested, or both, but I loved those comic books. I also loved Betty and Veronica when I got older, because comic books were the only books that I could afford to buy. So the other books came from the library, but books that I could afford to buy at that time were all comic books. So I have to say my love of reading came from comic books, and my mother reading to me the golden books and teaching me how to read at a very young age, which is in another question. Number 4, Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. What's the most unusual book you've ever read? All right. And I have to blame, not blame, but Sean the Book Maniac asked me to read this book. And the covers will be on this side, and it's called Bear by Marian Engle. She's a Canadian writer. And if you look at the covers, you will kind of get the idea about what's going on. But this book won a lot of prizes, and it's about a sexual relationship between a woman and a bear. That's all I'll say about it. But it's also talking about women's liberation and a woman's strength. But I couldn't, it's very graphic, and I couldn't get away from, it's not Beauty and the Beast, trust me on that. Okay, that was the most unusual book that I've ever read. 5, Where the Wild Things Are. What is your favorite book featuring the natural world? You know, I couldn't really find a book except maybe H is for Hawk that I haven't read yet by Helen MacDonald, or one of the Insight books, and this one is Israel, and I love travel books. And no, I've never been to Israel, but here it says Conserving for the Future, and it has pictures of the natural world in Israel. So I love to read travel books, and in the travel books you see a lot about the natural world. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay, 6, Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown and illustrated. Now this book I've heard of. I think it wasn't, I'm not sure when it was printed, when it was published, but I did hear of it, and I think I just bought a copy for my granddaughter about a year ago. She's 3 years old now, and I did read it. It says, do you read at bedtime? Do you read to someone else at bedtime? Did anyone ever read to you at bedtime? I think I'm going to answer very differently than most people that I've seen. 1 or 2 people said they read at bedtime. I almost exclusively read in my bed, in my bedroom or in my bathroom. I don't read much when I'm down. I have 2 levels of my house, so when I'm downstairs, I have other things to do. I'm editing my second memoir. I'm planning to go on a trip, so I'm always doing something else beside, my regular work, you can say. So when I'm upstairs and I stay up very late, I'll read. That's when I do my major reading. So do I read to anybody? I read to my children, all 4 of them. Does anyone read to me? My mother read to me. Okay, so 7. Guess How Much I Love You by Sam McBratney and illustrated by Anita Jaram. Who had the biggest influence of you as a reader? The biggest influence in my whole life as a reader and everything else was my mother, for the good or for the bad. But she was a voracious reader. And I recently found out I have a cousin that I never knew about, a first cousin, in fact. And we are the same age and we were brought up in the same city, and yet we never knew each other, which is very strange. But we're friends now. And she told me her grandfather was a big reader. And my mother wrote in a remembrance book that her uncle, who was my cousin's grandfather, used to bring her books. So, and then I found out that somebody in my family was a rabbi, and rabbis read a lot. So my mother taught me to memorize and read by the time I was 2 or 3. I don't know how she did it, but I've been a reader ever since then, and I thank her for that so much. I think parents are so integral in a child's loving books, and sometimes you're not successful. As Brian at Bookish told me in a comment, that some of his children aren't readers. And, you know, that's all right. I mean, he was talking, I think on a Saturday Hodgepodge, where he was talking about teachers and reading and who has the most influence over a child's reading. I don't believe it's a teacher. I really don't. It has to come from the home way before a child is introduced to books at school, though it can happen at school. So that was my mother. Number 8, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Which book or set of books would you give to an emerging reader? Or which book have you given as a gift more than once? I don't give books to people as gifts, because most people who don't read would not appreciate that. In fact, a friend of mine, her daughter said to her, "So what do you want for your birthday? A book? I'll give you a book." So she said to her daughter, "I'll give you a book for your birthday." And this was not said in, neither of them wanted a book. So I would say, I'll take the book. You know, I would love books for my birthday. But yeah, that wouldn't be something that you give to a person who you know is not that much of a lover of reading. And my friend who didn't want a book from her daughter actually does read. She just doesn't want a book as a present. But I've given her books, usually self-help books. Now, to an emerging reader, I have 4 children, so they were all emerging readers. And the book that started my daughter reading was Sweet Valley. And I think she started with Sweet Valley Junior High, and then she went all the way up to college. And she loved that book. She loved that series. And I think that started her as a reader. So whatever book is, you know, interest, this is what I told my students who thought reading was boring. I said, what are you interested in? You know, you're interested in something. Is it basketball? Is it baseball? Anything you're interested, there's a book about it. And start reading that way. So that was my advice to my students. My son, my eldest son, he got interested in books by A Wrinkle in Time, and I'll have that cover over here. What's interesting about the covers of A Wrinkle in Time, and I've never read it, though I am interested in reading it because my son was so adamant that I read it, and I had a small child at the time and I didn't have time for reading. other things were going on. But it said, there was an article that said A Wrinkle in Time has so many different covers. It said the many covers of A Wrinkle in Time. So I have 2 covers that I'll put up there. So I'm not going to end this video until I tell you that I did take out some books, picture books from the library. And one book that I'll tell you all the books, but first I wanted to tell you about Miss Pinkletons' purse. I was attracted by the older woman and a big purse because I always had a big purse and I'm an older woman. But I found out that this book is about homelessness. And I think that's so smart. And it was written by Patty Brazo, illustrated by Ana Ochoa. And it has beautiful illustrations. And the first page goes, rosy-cheeked and quite antique, Miss Pinkletons carried everything but the kitchen sink. From that day that she and her purse hit town, what got in her way, what got knocked down. The purse was so big that it dragged on the floor. When she rode on the bus, it got stuck on the floor. So here's the illustrations. And I'm thinking, you know, what is this going to be about? And it turns out that we get to this part and it said, Miss Pinkletons slept on her tree-sheltered bed as the willow's green leaves turned to gold, then to red. One night it grew cold and the dew soaked her clothes. Then the frost settled down on her cheeks and her nose. She shivered and dreamed of a fluffy, warm quilt on her bed in the house that her father had built. And here's the pictures. So it goes on to, and I don't know how they did it, but I'm going to read the whole thing. But she's happy and she gets her house back. And she's homeless. So in the end, there's a whole article about homelessness, and it says being homeless means not having a place to live or sleep or keep belongings. Life is very hard for someone who's homeless. Do you see homeless people in the town where you live? There are ways to help, just as Zoe did. Here are some other ways kids have helped, and there's actually a link where kids can go. I think this is a wonderful book. And in the back it says, a story of a lady with a big heart and no home and a girl who does something about it. And this would make me want to read picture books if I didn't already want to. And then I'm just going to say a few, I haven't read these, but I remember the Bernstein Bears, and I'm wondering if Have a Balloon is by Ariel Bernstein. Maybe she's the daughter. And Scott Magoon is the illustrator. And it caught my eye with all the balloons. And very well illustrated. And then Daniel's Good Day by Mika Arsher. These are really new picture books that I've never illustrated very, very beautifully, and it has diversity in it, which I like. And it says in the back, there are many good ways to have a good day. Take a walk with Daniel to find out what delights him and his neighbors. And that was interesting to me. And then, and I think I lost the page, but it is National Poetry Month this month. So I got a book about poems, a picture book, and this says Everything is a Poem, The Best of J. Patrick Lewis by Maria Cristina Pretelli. And I had a poem, but I want to read you this poem first, and it says, postcard poem. Find yourself a quarter, buy yourself a stamp. Tap it on your tongue until it's damp, damp, damp. Stick it on a postcard, mail it to a friend. Tell her you will be one till the end, end, end. And this is him. So the photographs are really beautiful. It's not as richly photographed, and let me see who the illustrator was. Oh, yeah, Maria Cristina Pertelli was the illustrator. And I'm not saying she didn't do a good job, but it's just more of, I think, more about poems than it is of book. And here is the one I wanted to read to you, is on page 59. So I'm just going to end with a nature poem, since I didn't really have many nature books to talk about. It's called Hurricane. And here's the picture, here's the illustration. So it says, there was a curly hurricane. Her name was Lorelei. And all she ever wanted was to fly, fly, fly. She wasn't like the other girls, for Lori never grew into a proper hurricane that flew, flew, flew. She twisted around the ocean. She meant to touch the sky. It took her tiny breath away to try, try, try. So Lorelei decided to a gentle wind be true. She breezed right into autumn, and she blew, blew, blew. I thought that that had feminism and the natural world in it. So I got 2 for 1. So welcome to my channel if you're new, and I hope you'll subscribe and join me for more baby boomer booktuber stuff. I hope to film a video before I leave, and my erstwhile partner Jackson will let it be live. And when I'm in Paris and hopefully Provence, I will try to, well, I'm definitely going to video stuff. How I'm going to put it together, that's another story, because I am the baby boomer booktuber, and I'm not exactly tech savvy, though I'm really trying. I am. And I'm thinking that I want to start doing a more basic kind of of editing. The only thing that bothers me with that is that I'm afraid that, you know, because now my partner is editing for me, and then it's going to turn into, you know, like crappy editing, but still, I want to do it. So until we meet again, like Elizabeth from Bookwins and Books says, à la prochaine. Till later, and aloha.